In August 1914, the war began, and the early phase is famously described in the book The Guns of August. During those opening weeks, the German army swept rapidly into France, pushing before them a wave of Belgian refugees fleeing the destruction. During this time, the French made a massive strategic mistake. France's war plan, known as Plan XVII, called for an immediate offensive into Alsace and Lorraine, the provinces France had lost to Germany during the Franco-Prussian War of 1870–1871. Retaking these territories had become a powerful national goal and symbol of revenge. However, the strategy proved disastrous. By concentrating troops and resources on reclaiming Alsace and Lorraine, France diverted much-needed forces away from northern France, where the main German invasion was unfolding. As a result, German armies advanced rapidly through the north and reached within 30 miles of Paris by early September 1914, while the French defensive line in the north came close to collapse. France's focus on emotional revenge, rather than strategic necessity, nearly led to a catastrophic defeat and the loss of the war. Despite their early successes, the Germans advanced too quickly and extended their forces beyond their ability to supply them. Food, ammunition, equipment, and reinforcements could not keep pace with the rapid invasion, leaving German armies increasingly vulnerable. This overstretch created an opportunity for the Allies to strike back during the First Battle of the Marne in September 1914. The Allied counterattack successfully halted the German advance toward Paris and forced the Germans to retreat. Both sides then began digging extensive trench systems to defend their positions. As a result, the war of movement that had characterized the opening weeks of the conflict came to an abrupt end. Following the Battle of the Marne, the Western Front effectively froze, and neither side was able to achieve significant territorial gains for the next 4 years, ushering in the long and brutal era of trench warfare. From late 1914 through 1918, the Western Front barely shifted more than 10 miles in any direction. The war became a stalemate, dominated by trench warfare. Soldiers on the Western Front dug deep, fortified trench systems that stretched nearly 400 miles from the English Channel to the Swiss border. These trenches were heavily defended with barbed wire, machine guns, artillery, and fortified positions, while also being densely manned by thousands of soldiers. As both sides reinforced their defenses, the trenches became extremely difficult to capture. Any attempt to break through enemy lines usually required troops to cross open ground under intense enemy fire, resulting in enormous casualties for little or no territorial gain. The strength of these defensive systems created a deadly stalemate in which repeated offensives led to mass slaughter without producing decisive victories. Life in the trenches was horrific and subjected soldiers to constant physical and psychological suffering. Trenches were often filled with thick mud and pools of stagnant water, creating miserable living conditions and contributing to the spread of disease. Soldiers had to contend with rats, lice, and other vermin, while the smell of decay from unburied bodies lingered across the battlefield. Day and night, the thunder of artillery shells shattered any sense of peace, leaving troops exhausted and under constant stress. Yet the only thing worse than living in the trenches was dying in them. Soldiers were frequently ordered to go over the top, climbing out of the safety of their trenches and charging across open ground into barbed wire, machine gun fire, and relentless artillery bombardment. By Christmas 1914, it had become clear to both sides that the war would not be the short, glorious conflict many had expected. Despite the staggering casualties and harsh realities of trench warfare, neither side was willing to seek peace, as both remained convinced that their cause was just and that victory was still within reach. While the Western Front settled into a bloody stalemate of trench warfare, the Eastern Front remained far more mobile, with armies maneuvering across vast distances. During the summer of 1915, Russia suffered a series of devastating defeats at the hands of German and Austro-Hungarian forces. Russian casualties were enormous, with approximately 1 million soldiers killed and another 500,000 captured. As enemy armies advanced, Russian forces were forced to retreat as much as 300 miles, surrendering large areas of territory, including Poland and Lithuania. The the retreat exposed serious weaknesses within the Russian military, which struggled with severe shortages of weapons, ammunition, food, and other essential supplies. Poor leadership and inadequate industrial production further undermined the war effort, leaving the army in a state of chaos. These military disasters increased public dissatisfaction with the government, intensified economic hardships, and fueled growing political unrest. The mounting frustration and loss of confidence in Tsar Nicholas II's regime helped create the conditions that eventually led to the Russian Revolution of 1917. By early 1915, the war had reached a stalemate, with neither side able to achieve a decisive breakthrough, yet the violence and loss of life continued on an enormous scale. In an effort to break the deadlock, both the Allies and Central Powers introduced new and terrifying weapons, including poison gas. Chlorine gas, phosgene gas, and later mustard gas were used against enemy troops, causing horrific injuries, blindness, severe burns, and often death. Despite its fearsome reputation, poison gas proved to be an unreliable weapon because it depended heavily on weather conditions. Shifting winds could easily carry the gas back toward the soldiers who released it, making it a danger to both sides. As many soldiers observed, gas did not know the difference in uniforms. Although chemical weapons added a new level of terror to the battlefield, they failed to break the stalemate, and the casualty lists continued to grow as the war dragged on. In February 1915, Germany declared a submarine blockade of Great Britain in an effort to cut off the supplies, food, and war materials that sustained the British war effort. German U-boats began targeting ships in the waters surrounding the British Isles, creating a new and dangerous form of naval warfare. The most controversial incident occurred on May 7, 1915, when a German submarine sank the British passenger liner Lusitania. Nearly 200 people were killed in the attack, including 139 Americans. News of the sinking outraged public opinion in the United States and sharply increased anti-German sentiment. Concerned that continued attacks on civilian vessels might draw the United States into the war, Germany sought to ease tensions by pledging not to sink passenger ships without warning and to take measures to protect civilian lives. Germany largely adhered to this promise for nearly 2 years, helping to postpone American entry into the conflict until 1917. Although Italy had been allied with Germany and Austria-Hungary through the Triple Alliance, it chose not to join the Central Powers when war broke out in 1914. Italian leaders argued that their alliance was defensive in nature and that Austria-Hungary's declaration of war against Serbia did not obligate Italy to participate. Instead, Italy remained neutral while considering which side offered the greatest advantages. In May 1915, Britain and France successfully persuaded Italy to enter the war on the side of the Allies by promising military support and the opportunity to gain territory from Austria-Hungary after the war. Italy's entry opened a new front along the Austro-Italian border, forcing Austria-Hungary to divert troops and resources away from other battlefields. Although Italy's military contribution was limited by difficult terrain and a series of costly offensives that achieved few major gains, its participation placed additional pressure on Austria-Hungary and aided the Allied war effort. During 1915, the Allies sought to expand the conflict beyond the stalemate of the Western Front by launching campaigns in Africa, fighting battles across the Middle East, and opening new fronts against the Ottoman Empire. Their most ambitious effort was the Gallipoli campaign, an amphibious invasion of Turkey intended to seize control of the Dardanelles Strait and open a supply route to Russia. Beginning in April 1915, Allied forces, including large numbers of troops from Australia and New Zealand, known as the Anzacs, landed on heavily defended Turkish beaches. Poor planning, difficult terrain, and strong Ottoman resistance doomed the operation from the start. British commanders largely directed the campaign from offshore while Allied troops faced repeated and costly assaults against entrenched enemy positions. The campaign quickly became a bloody stalemate, resulting in thousands of deaths and injuries. By the end of 1915, the Allies were forced to evacuate their forces, having failed to achieve their objectives. The Gallipoli campaign became one of the war's most significant Allied disasters and is remembered especially for the heavy sacrifices made by the Anzac soldiers. By the end of 1915, the optimism and enthusiasm that had greeted the outbreak of war in 1914 had largely disappeared. On the Western Front, armies remained locked in a deadly stalemate as opposing trench systems stretched across hundreds of miles, making major advances nearly impossible. New technologies such as machine guns, heavy artillery, and poison gas turned the battlefield into an environment of unprecedented destruction while doing little to break the deadlock. In the east, Russian armies suffered devastating defeats and territorial losses, exposing serious weaknesses in the Russian war effort and increasing unrest at home. Meanwhile, the Ottoman Empire successfully resisted Allied attempts to force a breakthrough at Gallipoli, proving that the war would not be easily won on new fronts. Italy entered the conflict on the Allied side, but its offensives against Austria-Hungary achieved few meaningful gains. At sea, German submarines threatened Allied shipping and demonstrated the growing importance of naval warfare, but Germany temporarily limited its submarine campaign to avoid provoking the United States into entering the war. By the close of 1915, World War I had evolved from a conflict expected to be short and decisive into a global, industrialized catastrophe marked by immense casualties, widespread suffering, and no clear end in sight. The worst years of the war were still to come,